Cheryl is an integrative health nurse, author, and natural medicine practitioner. A graduate of Purdue University, Cheryl's first degree was in nursing, and she also has clinical certifications in oncology and gerontology, how appropriate for today, the study of aging. And because of her unique background in conventional and integrative health, Cheryl is frequently contacted to share her opinions on natural health with prestigious publications like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Prevention Magazine. Cheryl is a well-known advocate of bridging the worlds of mainstream and natural medicine together in order to achieve optimal health outcomes. Cheryl currently serves as the Chief of Scientific Affairs and Education for Europharma. We are so excited to have Cheryl here today to discuss longevity and natural interventions that can help us stay in control during the aging process. So welcome, Cheryl, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I certainly appreciate it. And welcome to all of you who've taken time out of your busy morning in order to learn more about some of the controllable factors we have for our aging process. So let's get started. So longevity is, study of longevity is looking at what can we do to set ourselves up for success to live a very long, very healthy life. When we look around the world, there are several areas that we call blue zones, and blue zones are areas where they have a disproportionate number of individuals who live past the age of 100 and still stay in fairly decent health. And we see Loma Linda, California, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Sardinia, Italy, Ikaria, Greece, and Okinawa, Japan. Well, one of the things that these places all have in common is that they do exist in more moderate temperate zones. And so you don't see a lot of blue zones that are in northern Siberia or on Baffin Island in Canada. They're also not in the middle of the tropics. And so while they may be quite warm and might be very hospitable climates, they're also not dense, humid, 100-plus degree heat every day as well. In Loma Linda, California, there's an artifact in that there is a high concentration of people who are Seventh-day Adventists who are also vegetarian. And so these vegetarian individuals, because of their diet and their lifestyle, also plays a role in boosting up those numbers in Loma Linda to past 100. However, in the other areas, these are not vegetarian locations. However, there is, as you'll notice, they're all on the ocean, and all of them do incorporate higher levels of seafood than other types of animal protein into their diet. So one of the things I think that we can do to look at healthy living and healthy aging is to think about where we live, how we act, how we interact with others, and the types of food that we eat. Now, when we look at the top causes of death in America, 50% of all deaths in the United States come from the top 3 killers. So when we look at heart disease, cancer, and lower respiratory diseases, that would be chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, emphysema, chronic bronchitis, maybe even different kinds of pneumonias. These are the top causes of half the deaths in all of America. When you add in the next 7, you account for 75% of all the deaths that occur in America. And as you'll see, let's take out accidents. But when you look at every other one of these types of deaths, every single one, even suicide, has elements of inflammation and oxidative stress that are making changes in the body, whether it's the heart, whether it's in cellular replication, or whether it's in brain function itself. So we do have some controllables in our arsenal to help slow down the aging process. You know, people do not age at the same rate. There was a recent study that was published just this year looking at 38-year-olds, and they found that biologically, a tiny percentage of those 38-year-olds were biologically 28 years old, and a tiny percentage of them were actually 48 years old when it comes to their biology. When we look at what we expect with different types of systemic factors that doctors analyze, the majority were right around somewhere between 35 and 41, so close to 38. So people age at different rates. Some of that is controllable. And so while we cannot and have not yet found the ultimate fountain of youth to turn us all back into 20-year-olds, it is true that we can play a very active role in slowing down the aging process. And the three most controllable and most profound influences on our rate of progression towards aging are free radical damage, oxidative stress, so we can neutralize free radicals; inflammation, chronic inflammation, key player in accelerated aging; and our ability to detoxify the compounds into which we come into contact. So when we look at what we can use from a supplement standpoint to enhance longevity, and I think that you already know some of the factors of healthy diet, eating close to nature, reducing your reliance upon processed foods, looking for fresh, shopping the periphery of the grocery store, and staying active and involved in the social life. They found that individuals who live in these blue zones, another commonality is that they have much deeper ties into family and neighbors and local organizations, so there's a greater sense of community. So all of those play a powerful role, but today we're going to talk about supplements. And so there's three characteristics that I notice in supplements that can play an important role in helping to slow down the aging process. The first there, that's the super potent antioxidants, because remember, we've already said that oxidation and oxidative stress plays a huge role in aging. Another is the ability to control chronic inflammation, and we do have the power to do that. High levels of inflammation are implicated with all kinds of diseases and acceleration of the aging process. And last but certainly not least is we can boost up our ability to detoxify the compounds into which we come into contact. So you may know some of these toxins. It might be the Tylenol in the over-the-counter drug bottle that's sitting on your cabinet. It might be the tequila you had last night. Those are toxins that our body detoxifies. But the majority of toxins you come into contact with, you have no awareness of. So they could be things that are being degassed in new carpeting and new upholstery. It could be compounds that are on your hands when you pump gas. It could be things that you come into contact with when you drive into an area with high levels of air pollution. It could be gases that are released from the very earth where you live. So not trying to make you all paranoid, and we can't live in a plastic bottle, but just know that though we cannot control every toxin that we come into contact with, we can control and enhance and make stronger the way that our body takes out the trash, the way that our body gets rid of these toxins. So let's talk about oxidation first. Oxidation is free radical corrosion. So when we look at what happens to a vehicle with extreme exposure to the air over long periods of time, we see that rust develops. Believe it or not, rust is an oxidative reaction. When we look at a piece of fruit, a nice piece of fruit that's cut open, if you leave it on the counter for very long, if you cut an apple in half or a pear in half, and you leave it set for a little bit, or guacamole, that's another one, they go brown very quickly. That's a reaction, an oxidation reaction that happens when it comes into contact with oxygen in the air. Well, the same types of things happen in our body. Now, we have to have oxygen to survive, but there's other things that oxygen does in our body in the form of oxygen-free radicals, and this causes oxidation. Some people simplify it and say it's like rust in your cells. That's not exactly true, but it does play a role in damage to our cells, and cells that are damaged do not create perfect children. You know, our cells that we have in our bodies today are not the cells we had in our body more than 7 years ago. By the time you have achieved 7 years, every single cell in your body has turned over at least once. And so I sometimes jokingly say that if you made a mistake more than 7 years ago, it no longer counts because that was another person entirely. So within 7 years, every single cell in our body undergoes a replication process. So the old cell dies, the new cell comes on board, and we want those new cells to be as perfect and as exact a replication of the parent cell as possible. And what happens with oxidative stress and some of the other things we're going to talk about is that these cells get damaged and they no longer make perfect replicas. So that's one of the biggest risks we have when we talk about free radicals. Now, the worst of the worst, now these are not all of them, but some of the worst that we have to worry about are the hydroxyl free radicals, superoxide anions, and the creation of hydrogen peroxide in the body. our body contains a check and balance process. A little bit of oxidative stress is good. A little bit of oxidative stress is useful. Our immune system sometimes uses free radicals to kill invaders. So sometimes these compounds that are created by the reaction of oxygen within our body play an important role. But in the vast majority of people in this country, we have huge levels of oxidative stress, many, many, many times more than we need for optimal health. And so it's important to think about how can we arrest, how can we quench these free radicals before they can do very much damage in our body. Now, when we look at free radicals, free radicals are the bad boys that are created when you are exposed to oxidative stress. So it creates free radicals, and they just go around making trouble. They go around bumping into healthy cells and damaging them. So when they look at, for example, Parkinson's disease with dementia, so these are later stages of Parkinson's disease where enough brain damage has occurred as a result of the Parkinson's disease to cause changes in thinking patterns and judgment. And they looked at the level of free radical activity in people that were the same age and healthy versus individuals with Parkinson's disease. And as you can see, there's some pretty dramatic differences. Hydroxyl free radicals, that rate in the healthy individuals was 666, but in people with Parkinson's disease, 745. Hydrogen peroxide was 1.93 versus 2.15. Nitric acid, 49.6 in healthy individuals, 68.41 in individuals with Parkinson's disease with dementia. And these results have been replicated over and over and over again. And so when we look at, for example, these brain diseases, Alzheimer's, memory loss, depression, stroke, cancer, diabetes, inflammation, infection, accelerated aging, cataracts, macular degeneration, hypertension, heart failure, arteriosclerosis, arthritis, etc. The list goes on and on. Even the list on this page is not all included. When we look at these diseases, we find that there are higher levels of free radical activity, especially of the most difficult to arrest free radicals, than in their age and gender-matched healthy compatriots. So getting on board with being able to give your body the tools and the weapons it needs to arrest free radicals is one of the most important steps you can take in preventing, number one, accelerated aging, and preventing chronic deteriorating diseases. Now, this was a study. Remember we said that Okinawa is a blue zone. Well, in Okinawa, many individuals live well past 100, and they're in relatively decent shape. And as we see, the levels of oxidative stress get higher and higher and higher as we age. But in Okinawa, they get lower, and they call this a survivor effect, because the people who were not able to adequately manage their levels of oxidative stress died in their 70s and 80s. And so we see that the people who survive in Okinawa are those individuals who had the lowest level of oxidative stress. So by the time you get around to measuring the oxidative stress levels in people that are in their hundreds, as you will notice, this is even lower than the levels they found in 20-year-olds. So why is oxidative stress so dangerous? I talked a little bit about how it creates these free radicals and they go around damaging everything. Well, let's talk a little bit more about DNA damage and cellular mutations. I like to explain this as the blueprints for your brand new house spread out on the kitchen table, and you accidentally spill coffee on the blueprint. Well, this blueprint gave you all the directions you needed to make a big, beautiful, functional house. Now, look, you've smudged a few of the areas. You can't see it very well. So what if you use these same blueprints and you use them to build your new house? And maybe you leave out the back door because that part of the blueprint was smudged. Will the house still stand? Well, yes, of course, the house will still stand even if it doesn't have a back door. Will the house still last as long as a house with a back door? Yes, that house will last 100, 150 years if you take care of it, right? But there will be a difference. The house built from the damaged blueprint will not be quite as efficient as the house that was originally planned. Because if you don't have a back door, you're going to have to take everything in through the front door. If you go outside, you're going to have to work further. So even though structurally it's going to be okay and you can survive living in a house without a back door, it's just not quite as efficient. And now that you've damaged that blueprint, every single successive generation of houses that are built are going to have that same flaw. They're going to be missing the back door. Well, that's what happens when we have oxidative stress against the blueprint in our body, which is called DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, that double helix that's been discovered since the 1970s. This is the blueprint that our body uses to create a new cell. Oxidative damage spills coffee on the blueprint, and so you end up building a cell that's not quite as perfect as it was when it was originally designed. That's one of the reasons why my skin doesn't look the way it did when I was 3 years old, because I've had a lot of oxidative stress to my skin. I've had sunlight exposure. My skin is exposed to the world. The cells that are replicating now are not quite as perfect as the cells were when I was 3 years old. So the way that we can prevent some of this cumulative damage is to start as early as possible with arresting oxidative stress. Now, this takes us to disease also. What if you damaged the outline of the house? What if this coffee damage was a really bad spill and the outline of the house got smeared? You know what? The carpenters would not know when to stop building, and they would build and build and build, and they would add on more rooms and more rooms until they fill up your entire property. Whoops, there goes the garage. And then they start to expand onto the neighbor's property, and they knock down the neighbor's house and garage. Next thing you know, they've taken over the entire block because the blueprints have been damaged and the cell does not know when to stop building. That's what happens in cancer. So cancer cells do not invade us from outer space. Cancer cells are our own body cells that have had their blueprints damaged to such an extent that they've lost their built-in stop button. You don't know when they're going to stop, and so they keep regenerating and regenerating and building wildly to the detriment of our body. And so it knocks down the local area, and then when it becomes its most dangerous, it starts to invade other neighborhoods as well. So not only is the prevention of oxidative stress crucial for healthy aging, it is also crucial for disease prevention. Now I'm going to talk about 3 specific supplements and how they work in all areas of accelerated aging and what the science says about them. And then at the end, we'll have a 4th recap of some additional compounds that might play an important role in your own personal healthy aging regimen. The 3 most powerful are curcumin, glutathione, and grapeseed extract, because these touch all the processes. These work on reducing oxidative stress, these work on reducing chronic inflammation, and these work on enhancing detoxification. So glutathione, let's start with glutathione. Glutathione is called the master antioxidant. Some people have called it the mother of all antioxidants. This antioxidant is super, super powerful. It is made by our own body. You know, most of our antioxidants come in with the strawberries and the spinach and the oranges that we eat. Most antioxidants, we don't make very many of them. In fact, we only make 2 because we get them from our diet. We're designed to get our antioxidants from our diet, and that remains crucially important. However, there's one antioxidant that's so important that your body doesn't leave it to chance. Your body uses and creates glutathione from the minute you are born. Well, actually, from before you're born. Every single cell in your body makes glutathione, and your liver makes glutathione, and your liver releases that glutathione into the bloodstream. So your cells are bathed in glutathione from the moment you're born, inside and out. Super, super potent antioxidant. This neutralizes a wide range of free radicals, including some of the bad boys we talked about earlier that are the most dangerous. In fact, when it comes to hydroxyl free radicals, there's nothing that works like glutathione in order to arrest those free radicals. So you've got this on-board glutathione that's made inside your cells and made by your liver that plays a role in, and we'll talk about this later, inflammation and detoxification, yes, but it's also a kind of an antioxidant that touches on more types of oxidative stress than what you usually find. Additionally, glutathione helps the antioxidants that you consume in food work better. So let's say that you love oranges and tangerines and you're a big believer in vitamin C, or maybe you take vitamin C every day supplementally. Whatever the case may be, that vitamin C is not going to do very much unless you have enough glutathione on board. So let's say you eat some oranges, you think that you're really geared up now on vitamin C, but that vitamin C is going to be taken out of circulation very quickly. If you have glutathione on board, it helps those vitamin C and vitamin E to stay active longer. So you get much more sustained long-term benefits. You get much more bang for your buck. Lower levels of glutathione means not just that you're going to have difficulty with all the processes in your body that rely on glutathione, but you're also not going to derive the benefits from antioxidants that you consume in your diet as much as an individual who has ample amounts of glutathione on board. Additionally, your immune system requires glutathione to fight off infections and to fight off cancer cells. So when we look at how important this is, it's important to recognize and remember that glutathione comes in two forms. The active form, which I know this is confusing, but the active form is called reduced glutathione. That means it has an opening to take on a bad boy. It can grab, it has the back seat of the car is empty so that when you have reduced glutathione, it can grab the bad boys and package it up. So we call that active glutathione. After it's used up its superpowers, it becomes inactive, and then it's not very useful to your body. So it's important to remember that there's two forms, and what we're focusing on today is the active form. Additionally, another super antioxidant has to do with curcumin. Now, curcumin is a pigment that's found in turmeric, the spice turmeric. You know, you may have turmeric on your kitchen shelf. American yellow mustard is not that brilliant neon yellow from the mustard plant. It's that color because of the turmeric that's added as a little bit of a flavoring and as a natural coloring agent. Curcumin is the pigment that gives turmeric its brilliant color. And isn't that the way it often is? When you look at a vegetable or fruit, the pigment is one of the healthiest natural medicines that it contains. So what makes carrots orange? Beta-carotene. What makes tomatoes red? Lycopene. What makes, indirectly, shrimp and salmon pink? Astaxanthin, all of which are super potent natural medicines and antioxidants. Well, what makes turmeric that brilliant yellow-orange color is curcumin, although there's very little curcumin in turmeric. So when we look at studies, they're not studies of turmeric, they are studies of curcumin. So curcumin is about 2% to 5% of turmeric, and this was a study looking at protection against hydroxyl radicals, which are some of the nastiest. So what they used as a control, and this was their total antioxidant capacity when they were not exposed to an antioxidant, and you could see how dangerously it was reduced when exposed to a hydroxyl-free radical. But when they gave this exposure to a hydroxyl-free radical along with curcumin, you can see how it almost, not quite, but almost returned that individual to normal. So even in the presence of very high level of dangerous stressors, curcumin can make a significant difference in helping us to get back towards our optimal levels of the ability to use antioxidants again. Now, grapeseed extract also neutralizes hydroxyl radical activity. And you may say to me, this seems sort of like a replication. You know, curcumin, you've already told me curcumin does a good job, so why don't we all just take buckets of curcumin? And you already told me glutathione does a good job, so why don't we just take buckets of glutathione? And that would be an excellent question. There is some overlap, that is true, but there's also areas in which each performs independently. For example, curcumin is fat-soluble, and there's certain areas of the body that utilize fat-soluble compounds far better than water-soluble. Grapeseed extract is water-soluble, and there's areas of the body that use a water-soluble form better than do the fat-soluble areas. There are areas they overlap, and there's areas that they they work independently. I wish that there was a one-size-fits-all single element that did all the jobs we need in the body, but our bodies are far too amazing and complex, and that's why we need to talk about diversifying. You know, you diversify your financial portfolio to hedge your bets and make sure you're going to be okay, so that if one area starts to fail, you've got compensation in other areas. You want to diversify your health portfolio as well, and make sure you get broad spectrum coverage with some of the major players when it comes to fighting oxidative stress and the other factors that lead to accelerated aging. Now, in this study, they looked at grapeseed extract when they looked at hydroxyl radical formation, and this was looking at the lung by exposure to radiation therapy for cancer treatment. And as you can see, even small amounts of grapeseed extract were able to greatly reduce, look at the peaks over here, the group that did not get grapeseed extract, the sheer volume of creation of oxidative stressors. Look how tiny those peaks are when they were given with grapeseed extract. Another had to do with curcumin protecting against increased free radical levels associated with aging. Now, I want to pay special attention to this slide because, to me, it's amazing. So we're looking at superoxide production. Those are the creations of the bad boys. So in a young, healthy person, this is the control level. So they're not taking anything, and this is the level of superoxide production that they create. In older people, that level is, well, not quite double, but let's say 30 to 40% more. So as we age, we are less able to deal with free radical formation, and because of the aging process and because of different chronic illnesses we may have, we start to create more free radicals. Look at this with young people treated with curcumin and older adults treated with curcumin. This is amazing. This was done in exploring gerontology just 2 years ago. So when you look at young people with curcumin, not only did you bring down their creation of superoxide levels, you brought them down well more than 50%. And even in older adults, the curcumin brought those levels down to a lower level than even the 20-year-olds had. So when you look at adding in curcumin, it is such a super potent herbal when it comes to addressing the creation of free radicals and arresting and removing free radicals that even if you are an older individual, you can darn near get your rate down to that of a young person using curcumin, and you are even better off than a young person who is not using curcumin. So I thought this was really a powerful experiment showing that just the introduction of a single nutrient can make such a dramatic difference. It also shows, you know what else it shows? It's never too late to start, you know. I wish that I had started an intensive exercise program when I was 13 years old and kept it up my whole life long. That didn't happen, but that doesn't mean that introducing exercise now is not beneficial. While it is true that introducing antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, and detoxifying agents earlier on has a more powerful downstream approach, this slide shows you that it is never too late to start to make some changes to help prevent some of the changes that lead to chronic diseases and death. Now, this is a study looking specifically at curcumin and lifespan. And so in this study, we're looking at the standard diet, male and female, versus the standard diet plus curcumin. Now, this was an animal model. This is not human beings. But as you'll notice, just by adding in curcumin, look at what happened to the lifespan. So the female lifespan went up a solid 20%, and the male lifespan went up about 15%. But this is the equivalent in human beings of another decade or two of health. Curcumin also preserves fitness. Now, again, animal model, but they looked at aging, and the individuals that just ate the standard diet, when they were aged, had 80% reduction in their fitness levels versus the individuals who were also, no differences, it's just that they were supplemented with curcumin, had less than, isn't that amazing, even at an older age, less than a 20% reduction in their fitness level. So no differences in exercise rates, No difference in other factors relating to physical fitness. The only difference is standard diet or standard diet plus curcumin. All right, let's move on to inflammation. Inflammation is not a bad thing. Inflammation, you couldn't live without inflammation, but chronic inflammation, I believe, is probably the single highest contributor to death and disability in America. So which comes first, oxidation or inflammation? Inflammation creates oxidative stress. Oxidative stress creates inflammation. I don't know whether the chicken or the egg came first. All I know is that you need to address both of these systems simultaneously. Additionally, reductions in inflammation automatically result in reductions in oxidative stress. Now, when I'm talking to patients, I have to spend a little bit of time discussing inflammation because as I said, all inflammation is not bad. So I like to compare inflammation to a river. When the river's too low, you end up in a drought situation, and you won't be able to water your crops, so you might have to worry about hunger in the future. You won't be able to feed your livestock. You won't be able to wash your clothes. Maybe your family won't have any drinking water. It's a pretty serious situation, a drought. But what if that river runs too high and it floods and overflows its banks while you are in an immediate life-threatening situation? That water could wash away your farm, your livestock, your barn, your house, all your worldly goods, your family, and yourself. So it's immediately life-threatening. So where do we want that river to be? We want it to be right in the middle. It's the place I like to call the Goldilocks spot. Remember Goldilocks and the Three Bears? This is too hard, this is too soft, this is just right. Well, we don't want it too high, we don't want it too low, we want it to be just right. So the elements that control whether the river runs high or the river runs low in your body are the streams and the rivulets and the brooks and the tributaries that feed the river. And all of these are different pathways. That's why inflammation is not one thing. It's a combination of many factors that feed the river. And the reason that curcumin is incredibly powerful has to do with the fact that it touches all of those different pathways, as do some of these other compounds, as we'll be discussing in a moment. This is looking at the survival rate for individuals who are around 85 years compared to their composite score of 3 measures of inflammation. These 3 measures are TNF-alpha, which is tumor necrosis factor alpha, for those of you, the science geeks in our audience, interleukin-6, IL-6, and CRP, C-reactive protein. These 3 scores can be dependent, and the higher they are, the generalized likelihood of higher levels of inflammation in the body. So they looked at the survival rate of individuals who had the highest scores versus the lowest. And the individuals who had, at age 85, the highest levels of these inflammatory composites had the lowest survival rate. So this one right here, this rate right here, after 4 years, 60% of those individuals were gone. The people who had the best rates with the lowest levels of inflammation, right up here, after 4 years, only 20% of those 85-year-olds had lost their life. But by that time, they were 89. So that's a pretty dramatic difference, isn't it? 60%, 20%. So it shows us that we need to pay close attention to inflammation. And I know when you think of inflammation, you think of pain, and sometimes that's true. Arthritis can be painful, tendinitis can be painful, but there's also inflammation in your body that doesn't manifest itself as pain. For example, asthma is a kind of inflammation, and heart disease starts with inflammation, and cancer even starts with inflammation, and you may not have pain initially. So regardless of your disease status, regardless of whether or not you're in pain, it still makes sense to pay close attention to inflammation. High levels of inflammation are associated with both aging and disease. When you look at interleukin-6, one of those measures, if you have high levels of IL-6, you have cut in half your chance of living another 10 years. If you double your IL-6 and your TNF-alpha and your CRP, that's a 29% increase in heart failure. C-reactive protein levels are twice as high in the frail elderly versus elderly of the same age who are not frail. And in otherwise healthy women, everything identical except one woman has high levels of CRP, which is an indicator of inflammation, versus a woman who does not, are much more likely to develop diabetes. So we need to pay close attention to inflammation in any healthy aging protocol. Curcumin is the most powerful anti-inflammatory herbal in the world. There's others that can play a role, and we'll talk in a moment about the effects that grapeseed and glutathione can have, but curcumin is really stellar in this area. This looked at C-reactive protein, one of those markers of inflammation, and here's individuals' CRP level when they were exposed to salt water, saline. It's just a control, like a placebo. And then there's this compound called DEP that is, and DEP is something that causes inflammation. So it's a toxin that causes inflammation. So when you add curcumin and placebo, look how far down you drive inflammation. You drive it down tremendously from, you drive the CRP down from 60 down to 40. That's cutting it by a third. That's 33 and a third % reduction. That's pretty dramatic. But if you give the curcumin with the compound, remember this experimental compound that causes inflammation that's often found in air pollution, then look at this. The curcumin plus the toxin was able to bring it down almost to the rate of the individuals that weren't exposed to the toxin before. And please note, the curcumin and the toxin had better inflammatory control than individuals who were using nothing. So again, it can have a really, it's not just protecting against the unfortunate compounds into which we come into contact, but it can actually, even in the presence of those compounds, still drive our chronic inflammation lower than individuals who are not using curcumin. Grapeseed, in a study looking at grapeseed extract versus a steroid called dexamethasone. So this is in the steroid family of medication. They did an animal model of arthritis, and they looked at 3 different inflammatory markers, and they looked at grapeseed extract, and they looked at dexamethasone. And as you will notice, in every single area, especially in interleukin-1 beta inhibition, it was twice as good as dexamethasone at controlling that factor. These are all different kinds of compounds that are associated with inflammation. Glutathione levels are reduced in type 2 diabetes, but the inflammatory markers are increased. So in healthy individuals, their reduced glutathione, remember the reduced glutathione is a good thing. Reduced means the active level is at 5 versus people with type 2 diabetes, it drops to 1.5. That's a pretty dramatic change. And so when you look at their level of IL-6, though, their inflammatory markers go sky high. There is not much in your body that is more irritating than sugar. And when your blood sugars go up, and if they stay up, then they irritate the heck out of the inside lining of your blood vessel, which is one of the reasons why people with diabetes, the less controlled their sugar is in their bloodstream, the more prone they are to kidney damage, kidney failure, dialysis, and transplant, the more at risk they are for heart disease and vascular diseases because the irritation of the inside of the blood vessels triggers a chronic inflammatory process. They're at higher risk for heart attack and stroke, higher risk of poor circulation to the limbs, and blindness because of the blood vessels that feed the retina and the eye. So keeping blood sugar under control and reducing the inflammation caused by diabetes is absolutely crucial to living a long, healthy life, even if you do have diabetes. Last but not least, let's move into detoxification. Now, I don't know if you have family members or friends who tell you this story. I had an uncle once, and he smoked 3-pack of Camel cigarettes a day and put away a 5th of Jack Daniels, worked hard every day out on the farm, and lived to be 99 years old. And the only reason he died is because he got hit by a truck crossing the street from the grain store. You know, a lot of us hear these kinds of stories of people who do everything wrong, and they live to this healthy, ripe old age. You know, smoking is the #1 preventable cause of cancer in America. But yet we all know there are people who smoke their whole lives long that do not develop emphysema, COPD, or lung cancer. So why is that? Doesn't seem fair, does it? Well, I believe that these individuals are blessed with superhuman detoxification. So even if they smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol or whatever it is they're doing, exposure to dust from their agricultural work or pesticides, they still stay healthy. Why? Because they are blessed with some kind of superhuman detoxification process. You know, when let's say you take a shot of tequila, it takes a couple of hours for that tequila to be detoxified from your body, correct? So when the less you are able to detoxify, the longer that tequila circulates. And the longer it circulates in your bloodstream, the more effects it has on the cells of your body. The same is true with smoking. The compounds in smoking circulate in your bloodstream, and the longer they circulate, the more damaging effects they have to your cells. The same is true of environmental toxins. The same is true of the natural toxins that are in the foods we eat. The same is true of many of our medications. Many of our medications have medical activity, but they also have toxic activity in the body as well. So the unfortunate thing is you're not going to know if you're a superhuman detoxifier until you've already led a horrible life and ended up making every major health mistake and still living to be 99. We can't count on that because those individuals are quite rare. For the majority of individuals, their detoxification is average, or as we age, it becomes below average. And one of the major organs of detoxification in the body is the liver. The aging liver reduces in size by 25% between the ages of 20 and 70. So our liver gets smaller as we age. And our liver can regenerate itself. You've heard of individuals receiving liver transplants. That's because the liver is the only organ in the body that can regenerate itself. You can remove a portion of the liver, donate it to your ill child or sibling, and your liver will regrow. But the older we get, the lower the level of the ability of the liver to regenerate. It takes longer and it takes more energy, and it's a bigger struggle to regenerate. As we age, we have a reduced ability to remove waste materials, and we have a greater vulnerability to drugs and toxins. That's why sometimes in older adults or people with liver disease, you have to watch the use of medications and drugs very carefully because you can overdose them with a normal dose because they can't detoxify it. The blood flow to the liver is reduced by 33%, and drug clearance can be 30% or worse in older adults who are otherwise healthy. That's the kicker. In people who have a liver disease, it's even worse. Additionally, and this is a rather complex scenario, but let me just touch on it for a moment, there are things called advanced glycation end products, and they call them AGE. What a fortunate acronym, right? Because these advanced glycation end products do play a powerful role in aging. Some people call them glycotoxins. So they're sugar, but it's sugar that hasn't been able to be processed normally by the body. So when you have high levels of sugar exposure, and not just sugars, but refined carbohydrates, things that turn easily into sugar, when you have high blood sugar, hyperglycemia, and glucose, it creates these AGE products, advanced glycation end products, that are just terrible at damaging the cells of our body. With normal detoxification, our body grabs it because we make these every day and gets them out of circulation. Before they can get to the RAGE, which is a binding site. If the AGE makes it to the RAGE, it's a bad thing. It starts to activate cell molecules that alter the way our genes work and the way that proteins are expressed, and it dramatically increases our risk for cancer and heart disease, the top two causes of death in America. So, yes, it's important to keep our blood sugar levels as healthy as possible. Yes, it's important to avoid refined carbohydrates and sugars as much as possible. Small amount in the diet, fine. Large amount in the diet, you're going to be making more AGE, which leads to RAGE. But here is a bit of a good story. Curcumin helps glutathione depletion. So in individuals with a lot of AGEs in the liver cells, it depletes the body's ability to make glutathione, and they found that when you use curcumin, not only can you get it back to normal, but you can double the power of what normal used to be. Grapeseed also blocks RAGE. Remember, that's the receptor site that we want to keep coming back here, trying to simplify. We don't want age to reach RAGE. We want age to be detoxified. So grapeseed extract actually blocks the RAGE, so it's more likely that these end products, these glycation end products, get detoxified and taken out of the body. So here are individuals who have, this is the level of RAGE, microRNA expression of RAGE in a healthy individual versus diabetes. As you can see, almost 3 times, more than double the amount of RAGE connection than individuals that are healthy. But in individuals who used grapeseed extract, the standardized grapeseed extract, even in the presence of diabetes, were able to almost, not quite, but almost get that RAGE connection back to normal. Going back to curcumin, it increases the level of antioxidants present in the liver. Now, this is diethylnitrosamine, and this is nasty stuff. It causes toxicity in the liver. So control or healthy, this is after exposure to a liver toxin. So the healthy control of glutathione in the liver should be 19, but when it's exposed to a toxin, it drops to 6. But if you give the toxin with curcumin, there's barely any change at all. Glutathione peroxidase, which is one of the major enzymes involved in replenishing glutathione, were about 59 in the control. With a liver toxin, that capability dropped to 18, but with curcumin on board, it was able to restore from the damage almost back to normal. And the same with the creation of superoxide dismutase, again, 2.5, with the liver toxin dropped to 0.9, back to 2.33, even in the presence of a liver toxin. So what this should tell us is that we don't always know what we're trying to detoxify. We don't know what we're coming into contact with. But if we have some of these super potent compounds on board, like grapeseed extract, like active glutathione, like curcumin, if we have these on boards, no matter what life throws at us, we're going to be much better at keeping our healthy levels and activity of systems in our body going, even in the presence of these toxins. Now, one of the most damaging compounds out there for the liver is acetaminophen. One brand name is Tylenol, and it may surprise some of you because you may have heard that it's safer than ibuprofen because ibuprofen will tear up your stomach. Well, that's not true. Acetaminophen is incredibly toxic to the liver, and it depletes glutathione production in the body. The #1 cause of acute liver failure in America is acetaminophen. The #1 drug overdose seen in emergency rooms is acetaminophen, and sadly, 50% of those individuals were not trying to overdose. They overdosed by accident because they didn't realize how much Tylenol they were taking. They were taking Tylenol maybe they took 2 extra strength Tylenol for their headache, and then they took a cold and flu preparation because they had the flu, and then they have a chronic back injury, and they're taking Vicodin or Percocet, which are narcotic agents and a base of Tylenol. Next thing you know, liver's shutting down, and they're in the emergency room. So this is a study looking at curcumin's ability to reduce liver damage, and what they found is that this is healthy liver right here. This is significant damage, liver necrosis caused by acetaminophen. Now, this is curcumin on its own, so it improved liver health even above normal. So it made liver even better than what it had been otherwise. And when the liver was challenged with acetaminophen, we see some little areas of damage, but it greatly reduced the areas of liver damage compared to individuals who are using acetaminophen without curcumin on board. Grapeseed extract protects against alcohol-induced depletion of glutathione. So we all know that excessive amounts of alcohol are toxic to the liver. And anything that damages the liver knocks down glutathione in our body. But in this study, they looked at the ability of grapeseed to protect that tissue from the adverse effects of alcohol. So this is liver tissue with no alcohol exposure, liver tissue with alcohol exposure, and this is alcohol plus grapeseed. So it was not able to restore it to normal, but even in the presence of this liver toxin, was able to make it somewhat better. Same is true with alcohol exposure to brain. That's no alcohol, with alcohol, with alcohol and grapeseed extract. So I'm not saying that we should all go out and drink a six-pack and pop our grapeseed, but it just shows the power of a standardized grapeseed extract to help protect sensitive tissues in the body from the toxic effects of alcohol and other related toxins. So what do we need to know? Now that we've gone through some of the ways in which these three powerhouses can make a role and difference in healthy aging, there's a few caveats I'd like to add. Remember that it's curcumin and not turmeric. I've seen unscrupulous folks out there, especially internet providers, that will sell people a bottle of turmeric. It'll be 1,000 milligrams of turmeric in a capsule, and they'll put claims all over the label about curcumin. Contains curcumin. Curcumin is awesome, as seen on Dr. Oz, all those types of things. But what we see with that is that they never tell anybody how much curcumin is actually in their product. So in 1,000 milligrams of turmeric, there may be as little as 20 milligrams of curcumin. And as my grandfather would say, that's like spitting in the ocean to raise the tide. So you cannot, turmeric is healthy as a food, please eat it. But when you're trying to use it as a natural medicine, you have to use curcumin. And not all curcumins are created equal. Curcumin needs to have some level of bioenhancement so that you can take 2 capsules a day instead of 20 capsules a day. The form I like also contains turmeric essential oil because there are some astounding new studies coming out on AR turmerones that are in turmeric essential oil, but there's a variety of ways to get curcumin into your diet. So the one that I said is the curcuma longa rhizome is enhanced with turmeric essential oils, and it's also standardized for curcumin content. Many of the clinical studies done on curcumin were done at a rate of 500 milligrams of curcuminoids at least twice daily. And you can't, that would mean if you were looking at an unenhanced curcumin, that would probably be 5,000 milligrams twice daily. So if you're looking at 500 milligram capsules, that would be 20 capsules a day. I think it's a lot easier to use the essential oil enhancement and take only 2. With glutathione, you have to remember active, 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 because there's a lot of products on the market that are selling glutathione, but the absorption process, the digestion process and absorption of glutathione turns it from active into inactive glutathione. And as I often say, it's like adding to your dirty laundry pile instead of adding to your clean laundry pile. If you want to make things more efficient, which would work better for you? Well, if you add to the dirty laundry pile, you make more work for your body. But if you add to the clean laundry pile, you take some stress off of your body. So remember, active reduced glutathione, and it has to be in a form that is going to bypass digestion. The best way to get it, glutathione, no doubt about it, intravenous administration. When you put glutathione directly into the veins, you completely bypass digestion and you get some excellent effects. But oral glutathione that you take and you swallow and goes through the digestive process, even if it's enteric-coated, becomes oxidized. And that's why I like this newer form. It's sublingual glutathione. It is absorbed slowly under the tongue, and it increases when it's compared to oral glutathione, just plain oral glutathione, the rates of active glutathione versus inactive in the body by 230% after only 21 days of use. That's what the clinical study showed. Some people use the glutathione precursor N-acetylcysteine. That's useful too in younger, healthier people. But remember, N-acetylcysteine is a precursor, and we've already learned that our ability to make glutathione can drop by as much as 50% by the time we're 65, and even sooner if we have chronic diseases. So you can throw raw materials in until the cows come home. If the machine isn't working, you have to bypass the machine, and you can only do that with intravenous glutathione or sublingual glutathione. Grapeseed extract as well. Big difference in grapeseed extract in that there's Chinese-produced grapeseed extract that's on the market for $18 a kilo. There's also a French-produced grapeseed extract, byproduct of the wine industry, that's $350 a kilo. What is the difference between these two? Well, the French grapeseed extract only contains the compounds that are small enough to be absorbed by your body. These are called oligomeric proanthocyanidins. Don't say it 3 times fast. It's easier to say OPCs. These OPCs come as Chihuahuas and Great Danes. And Chihuahuas scoot through the doggy door very easily, and Great Danes get stuck or can't get in at all. So when we're looking at a grapeseed extract, you need to make sure that it is standardized to only have the small-sized OPCs. It only contains Chihuahuas, hence the difference in the two, but there is no comparison with regards to its medical efficacy in the body. Now, I promised that we also had just quickly touch on a couple of other compounds. So this is the fourth leg of the table, so to speak. I believe that very many individuals could benefit from vitamin D. The lowest vitamin D levels are associated with the highest risk of all-cause mortality and heart mortality. I usually, myself, use 5,000 IUs daily. I know that in individuals who have vitamin D issues, that number can go up. Vitamin D, especially if you live in the northern climates or areas where you don't get a lot of sunshine, or if you are not in a job where you're outside very frequently and get a lot of sun exposure, vitamin D supplementation can make a huge difference. Additionally, as we age, the layer of fat under our skin changes in its ability to have the change that's triggered by sunlight that creates vitamin D. So if you're 20 and you're out in a bikini, and the sun strikes your skin, it triggers a process in the color cells of your skin called melanocytes that starts the process of making vitamin D. You don't absorb vitamin D from sunshine. When you are 80 years old and you go outside in your bikini, then you are not going to have the dramatic increase in vitamin D status because the melanocytes have become less efficient at triggering that process. And so even with sunshine exposure does not necessarily guarantee that you're going to get vitamin D production. Ubiquinol, which is the active form of coenzyme Q10, works inside the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse, the energy producer inside the cell. And I believe especially in people who have cardiovascular risk, or cancer risk, or both of those diseases are heavily present in their family, should think seriously about supplementing with ubiquinol, the active form of CoQ10. And I think everybody needs omega-3 fatty acids. If you are a pescatarian and you're eating fatty fish every single day, okay, I'm giving you a pass. But for most individuals who are not eating a lot of fatty fish, then I believe that using omega-3 fatty acids, I prefer the kind that's in the non-oil form because of the issues with the oxidation of the oils, but I think it's absolutely critical for brain function, and high levels of DHA, which is one of my favorite omega-3s, showed a 47% decrease in dementia in one study. So to recap quickly, and I wanted to make sure we had a few minutes left to do questions, if we want to have healthy longevity, if we want to still be able to do the tango when we're over 100, we need to neutralize free radicals, we need to stop inflammation, and we need to boost detoxification. And some of the best compounds to do that, curcumin, 750 milligrams with 500 curcuminoids and turmeric essential oil. Remember, not turmeric. Not that there's anything wrong with turmeric, but you can't get the medicinal activity just from using turmeric alone. Grapeseed, up to 1,200 milligrams daily. Some people who are just using it as a maintenance use 300 or 400 daily, but if you have an active disease, that's generally the dosage that's recommended. Make sure that it's all Chihuahuas. Make sure that it's tannin-free OPCs, which means it's the lowest size of the OPCs. Glutathione, 300 milligrams daily, can go up to 600 milligrams daily. Sublingually, clean mouth under the tongue. Vitamin D, 5,000 IU, but it could go up or down depending specifically on your health status. I think cholecalciferol has been shown to be far more effective than the plant form of vitamin D, which is ergocalciferol. Ubiquinol, up to 300 milligrams daily, but if you have a disease that responds to ubiquinol, like congestive heart failure, or if you have problems with decreased cardiac output, or if you have kidney damage, there's a variety of different diseases that are particularly stressful for the body that you may even want to up this dose of ubiquinol, and omega-3 fatty acids, especially those that are rich in DHA. And so my wish for all of you is that you die very young at a very, very old age. So live long and prosper, and let's go into the questions. I see we already have several in our Q&A box.
Thank you so much for that great information, Cheryl. I mean, so much of this research has come out within the past 5 to 10 years, so that's incredibly exciting. And yes, I do see that we had a question on differentiating between the glutathione form you were talking about and also the liposomal glutathione.
That's a very good question. The liposomal process is, the best I can describe it as putting a little fat jacket on a compound. So if the compound doesn't absorb very well, you enrobe it in a little bit of fat and you put a little jacket on it, and the idea is that the intestines will grab onto the fat jacket and pull the compound in with it. So unfortunately, there are no human studies whatsoever on increasing glutathione levels using the liposomal format. The liposomal format that is indeed clinically studied, but the compound they used was vitamin C, and they showed that it did enhance absorption of vitamin C using the liposomal form. However, vitamin C does not in any way have the sheer volume of challenges that glutathione does. And so while it might be an interesting form to consider, until I see some research in humans or even animals that show that it's boosting the active levels of glutathione in the body successfully, then until we have that clinical study, I can't rely on it to deliver glutathione. Good question. Any others?
All right, so it also looks like we have a question about pine bark, and many people may be aware of the active compound called pycnogenol in pine bark, and someone was wondering if you could take that instead of the grapeseed extract that you had discussed.
Yes, you could. There's 3 very, very rich sources of these oligomeric proanthocyanidins. One is the grapeseed, one is pine bark, and one are peanut skins. You know that little reddish peanutty skin that you squeeze off of the peanuts? That is also rich in OPCs. But they are, you know, that some individuals have some preferences for one form versus the other. I personally like the ones from grapes and grapeseed. We have some really excellent research on how they work, but yes, you could indeed use that as well. Other questions?
All right, so we know that exercise is incredibly important, you know, at really all ages in our life, but are there certain types of exercise that actually increase inflammation in the body that you are aware of?
Yes, no. Remember, inflammation is a healthy response and a healthy process. So when you build muscle tissue, for example, you do create some low levels of inflammation when you tear the muscle fibers. So if you're trying to build muscle tissue, and you're doing weightlifting exercises, which I believe in, especially for bone density in older women who are struggling with bone density, you can't just supplement that away. You need to get some weight-bearing exercise in there, even if it's light weights. But when you put stress against the body, the way you make the muscle bigger is you break the muscle fibers and then they reknit. However, the low levels of inflammation that are created by weightlifting are more than offset by the benefits that you get by having higher levels of muscle tissue to fat ratio in the body and increased strength. So yes, indeed, being alive creates inflammation. We would not be alive without inflammation. Some of the worst, though, are probably some of the extreme. Marathoning is not connected, you know, associated with longer lives. When you look at the people who live the longest, it tends to be individuals who do have intensive activity, but also have long periods of rest in between. So there's been a lot of controversy out there because a huge amount of free radicals and inflammation is created by running 26 miles or by doing super marathons. If it's something that you feel passionate about and you love it and you love that endorphin high, then I think that I would supplement even higher with regards to helping to reduce the oxidative stress that's created by that extreme exertion, and I would also probably boost up the amount of compounds I'm using to reduce inflammation.
All right, and if we can just go back to that recap slide really quick, I know we had a couple questions on, you know, are these something that everyone should be taking on a regular basis, or if someone's relatively healthy, are there a couple compounds on here that are, you know, maybe more helpful than others?
Well, I have to fess up to a bias because I work and have worked in the dietary supplement industry and in integrative medicine for 17 years now, and I've read a lot of studies and I've seen a lot of results and wonderful anecdotal reports of individuals who are using these for some pretty serious conditions. So I personally think that every single person who graduates from high school should be handed a bottle of curcumin and then be told, start taking it now, you'll probably add 10 or 15 years onto your life. So I believe that curcumin is incredibly valuable to be used, a compound to be used probably at much lower levels. You don't need the disease-associated levels, but at least a little curcumin every day is quite beneficial. Also, I would add in grapeseed. I like those two together. Glutathione, I generally don't recommend supplementing with glutathione unless you have a disease. For example, there's a lot of work being done with autism and glutathione because of the reduced ability of young people with autism to keep the glutathione in the active form, so the ratio gets completely screwed up. But unless you have a disease, I don't see using glutathione in youth. At least if you're past 40 and you want to set yourself up for optimal aging, maybe a much lower dose, maybe 75 milligrams sublingually. The tablets that the clinical studies were done on were 150 milligrams, so even breaking one in half once a day would probably be a nice little boost to getting a little extra glutathione on board. Vitamin D, the more I learn about vitamin D, the more I think that most individuals, unless you work outside and you live in a very sunny area, that there's probably some level of vitamin D that would be beneficial for you. Ubiquinol I generally don't recommend until people get older unless they're trying to address a specific disease concern. So if you are 40 or 50 and you're trying to set yourself up for healthy longevity, maybe 100 milligrams a day. And omega-3 fatty acids, as long as children are old enough to eat from a wide variety of food, I start supplementing with a little bit of omega-3s because so little of it occurs in most people's diet. Hope that wasn't too confusion. So the answer is yes to some and no to others.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think we just had one more question come through here. It is on curcumin, and does it help keep the HPV virus at bay?
Well, it would be useful, but I would also add in glutathione, because when you look at the diseases for which we have found there is a disrupted ratio of active to inactive glutathione, every single chronic viral illness that they've looked at thus far, like they've looked at Epstein-Barr, they've looked at CMV, they've looked at HIV, they've looked at Lyme's disease. When we look at these different kinds of chronic infective processes, then we see that there's an enormous amount of glutathione depletion that's occurring. And then that when you get to a certain level of glutathione depletion, then you see more of a flare. So absolutely, I think the two together might be very useful.